Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/kyhistorypod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're ready for phase 2?
Yeah, so the Union is going to regroup. They've got a solid line that they set up on a road called the Duncannon Lane. It's a east-west running road. Cruft's brigade
is.
Yeah,
I know where that is because there's an exit now.
There is, yeah. And now the sad thing is about this part of the battlefield is where Charles Cruft's line was, where the major fighting happens. That's all developed now. It's a some sort of industrial plant. I didn't really see what it was, but yeah, it's so you don't the battlefield, the visuals that they would have seen. That's all gone. But across the road a little bit more, you can see where Manson's line was set up, and that still seems to be farmland and pasture and things like that. But yeah, so Cruft's line is going to be on the if I'm in the Union line, Cruft's line's on the right, Manson's line is on the left, but it's behind Cruft's line about 200 yards. So it's not quite end to end, flank to flank line. There's a gap, and Manson's line is a little further behind. So Cruft, and he sees the Confederates advance, and he, they start to trade volleys, and he mistakes whenever they get into like this little ditch, and he mistakes just from his view that this Confederate brigade that's moving up on him is either retreated or it's stalled, and so he thinks, well, let's move in on them, and we can put them to flight. So he doesn't realize that the Confederates are not retreating at all. They're just reloading and taking cover, really. And so as his men get closer, the Confederates rise up and just blast away. And it's some pretty thick, heavy fighting. And this whole time, Cruft's line is just getting hammered now. I mean, they're getting hit on the flanks again. And Manson's line, 200 yards behind, never fires a shot during this entire time. For one, I mean, they are somewhat out of range. We think of rifled muskets, that they're super accurate. They're rifled, should be able to hit something at a long distance. You also have to think about these guys have never really shot these things enough to be good at them. So it's going to be a waste of ammunition for one. And when you look at it, you can stand on the spot where Cruft's line was. There's a little pullover area, and you can see where Manson's line was. And it's I mean, even with, a modern weapon, I don't know that I would feel confident in being able to hit anything from that distance. So Manson's line doesn't really do anything. And then it's a pretty brisk fight here. Claiborne's now Preston Smith's division, now that Claiborne's been wounded, they move up on the east side of the road towards Manson's line, and they see Manson's line so far back and then Cruft's line so far forward that they decide that instead of going to Manson's, they're just going to turn and swing around and crush Cruft, which is basically what they do. And so as they're doing this, though, the Union artillery, just to show how good this Confederate infantry is, the artillery's blasting canister and just creating these massive holes in the Confederate line, and the Confederates don't stop. They, several guys go down, and that line dresses itself up and just keeps on advancing as if, some guy says, as if they were on parade, like as if nothing happened. Like that's just how well trained and how well experienced they are. That, green troops, that happened, they'd be gone, and they would turn around and be gone. These guys, it's like they're just robotic. They just fill that hole and just keep on going. And they crush into Cruft's getting hit on both his right and his left. And then, so the thing that happened to Manson in phase 1 is happening to Cruft here in phase 2, getting hit, crushed on both flanks, getting tore up pretty good. And so they have to retreat there as well. And so this is going to be the longest lull of the battle. Manson orders both brigades just to fall back to Richmond. This is kind of when Bull Nelson shows up. And Bull Nelson is not happy because apparently he ordered Manson not to bring on an engagement, not to bring on a big battle. And he sees what's going on here, and it looks like a pretty big battle to him. And it's not going well. And but Manson claims that he never got such an order. So there's a lot of, I told you to do this, well, I never got this, sort of a lot of that going on. And it's I don't know if it's something that's really ever been resolved. It's kind of like, if you get a lost order somewhere and it's just been lost to history, someone's lying. And it who's lying, I don't really know. So and the thing is, like, Nelson was in Lexington. He had traveled somewhere else, and then he travels to Richmond. I mean, several miles on a horse in a very short amount of time. And so, I mean, he's mad and he's grumpy.
You talk about that. Let me show this map here that kind of probably can paint that picture. So if you got Richmond is right down here at the bottom, and then you got Lexington all the way up here, and there's no way of really saying where Duncannon is. I'm going to say it's a little bit like south of the word Richmond.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look in there too, see if I can see.
I can zoom in just a little more.
It's going to be in between. I think that's Rogersville right there. So it's in between Richmond and Rogersville. Rogersville area is pretty close to where the first phase was. Okay. Yeah, it's the first phase was, I guess you could say, a couple miles south of Rogersville, close to Mount Zion Church. And that's the Richmond Road that they keep retreating up, towards Richmond. Yeah. And then Duncannon Lane is, I guess, in a way, it's in the middle of phase 1 and phase 3 there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, and then you zoom out and you just got Lexington all the way up here. So riding the horse all the way down to there, and being in shambles is definitely not going to be pleasing.
Yeah. So that's when that Navy talent of that sailor's tongue comes out, and I mean he's giving everyone a tongue lashing, and there are several accounts where, I mean, when his men are retreating, he's taking his sword and taking the broadside of his sword and smacking guys with, getting them back in line. There's some instances or some stories where he apparently, there was a wounded Union soldier trying to get to the rear, and Nelson didn't think he was wounded and hit him on the head and caused pretty severe injury. And so it's Nelson's conduct at Richmond is not exactly stellar. I think if he had been in command of a full force that was together under his full command, I think he would have actually done pretty well. But he's showing up at something that it's not really a salvageable situation. And so he is, just to keep his men from just outright running, he's lying to them and tells them that reinforcements are on the way and we'll whip them yet. Keep fighting just a few more minutes. And so he's feeding this lie to him. And, the soldier's like, oh, there's reinforcements coming. Great. There are no reinforcements.
We can do it.
Yeah.
This blatant lies.
Oh, yeah, they were. Yeah, so when they retreat back to Richmond.
That's like telling your students, hey, if you don't pass this K-Prep test, you got to stay in this grade.
Yeah, you can't move on to the next grade. Yeah. Yeah, so just enough of a lie to give some good motivation.
Yeah. I can't follow. I understand what he's doing, I guess.
Yeah.
trying to get the victory.
Yeah, so he's trying to salvage whatever's left of these two brigades that he has. Basically, what he wants to do is drag this out tonight. As soon as nightfall comes, that's traditionally when Civil War battles would stop, because you can't. They couldn't see anything, at night back then. For us, it's a little different today, but back then, you could not see anything, and you ran the risk of firing into your own men and everything. So night attacks were very rare, never really successful. So he's just trying to, if we can stop them until nightfall, then we'll be okay, and we can retreat throughout the night, get back to the Kentucky River on the north side of the river, and then we can set up a good position, and we'll be safe and we'll be good. That's what he wants, but obviously it's not what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's just crazy to think how many, I guess you could say decisions or things kind of just went wrong.
They did.
And
yeah.
For the Union, obviously, things were going quite well for the Confederate side of things. Well, let's get to the next. I'm going to ask you the question: what do you think the biggest mess up was? Well, go ahead. At this point, what do you think the biggest issue? Probably,
in my opinion, I think Manson, he screws the whole thing up by moving south, really without any support. Just one brigade out there. That's just, I feel like it's just inviting trouble. And then, without having any support nearby, if they had both brigades there at the same time, maybe things would have gone better. But, it's just, he claims that he moved south to get to a better position. If you go to Richmond, there's a lot of these ridges that are just rolling ridges going up and down the Richmond Road there. And they could be a pretty good defensive position, but when you're one brigade going up against two Confederate divisions, that's not gonna, it's not gonna help. Now, he didn't know what was all in front of him. You can blame his cavalry for that. They had not been performing well, but I feel like things would have been a lot safer for him if he had just stayed a little closer to the city of Richmond itself instead of venturing so far south.
Yeah. I guess just not knowing, or you want to say maybe he was just too ambitious, trying to get cover too much or more ground, or I don't know. It's always hard to get into their mindset.
It is, yeah, because you don't know if was he doing it to be a hero, or was he doing it because he was just incompetent. Manson is going to be in command later in the war. He's gonna. He doesn't get fired or anything, and he does fairly well. So I don't want to say he was incompetent, but it just, I guess he just had a bad day.
It was a dumb move.
Yeah, it was just a bad decision to move south like that, and I just we have the benefit of hindsight, being able to look back and see, well, there's where the mistake was, but from what he knew and what he saw, he thought he was making a good decision. And, I don't know what all information he had. He claims he didn't get some information. He didn't get some orders or something. So, it's just really hard to say.
Yeah. Well, we can just sit here and talk about it. So, so you said that you keep saying lulls, right?
Yeah.
So what exactly does that? Is that just is that a battle term? What do you?
It might be a Western Kentucky thing. I'm not really for sure, but yeah. So I'll say a lull, just when the fighting stops and there's really no fighting going on at all. So I would say it's almost like halftime or intermission, something like that. So where it's the entire day is called the Battle of Richmond, August 30th, but the battle was not start here and ends here. You know, it starts, stops, and then there's nothing for a few hours, and then starts up again, and it stops, and there's nothing for a few hours. And, you know, in between those phases that we talked about, it's mostly the two forces just moving. The Confederates resting, getting water, getting resupplied, and then moving, you know, in pursuit. So that's what I mean when I say lull. It's just a pause in the fighting.
Gotcha. Well, you said phases. I kind of was like, okay, phase, but yeah, I didn't know if that was a specific thing or anything like that. Or you know, a cool Civil War term that I just didn't.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I don't know if very many people that use it, honestly.
It's an Owensboro.
It might be.
That's so well. Let's so final one, right? The third.
One more phase left. Yeah.
One more phase, and again, you said the first phase is more towards Rogersville, then Duncannon. So now we're moving though
up to the city itself. Yeah.
Okay, and I'll show the map just again too. I got a different map that's not as many things popping out of it. But you can see here a bit more. You know, Rogersville, halfway point, little bit more, probably Duncannon, and then you got Richmond. So they're moving north.
And you look at that map, that's a lot of ground that they've covered, you know, in one day with that weather, that lack of water, and fighting a battle at the same time.
Yep. So pretty cool. It's nice showing those maps, right? It looks cool. I don't know if I mentioned, but Derrick here is our guinea pig doing our new cool sharing stuff. So let's move on to the third lull, I guess, or the third phase, however you want to say it. The climax of the battle, basically.
So Nelson, he's going to make one last stand. Just, you know, he's hoping he can make it last till nightfall, and so he posts his men up in the Richmond Cemetery. It's actually, you know, you can see some of the topography if you go to the cemetery today. You can kind of see, you know, it is a little bit of a rise. I think there's like a railroad going in front of it now, which kind of cuts into what it actually used to look like a little bit. But it's a decent position, and there's a pretty heavily wooded area there too, where he's got some of his men posted. So it's a decent spot. And this is where, you know, the final attack happens, and the Confederates have an entire brigade that have not been used yet. They haven't even been in the fight. They've just been marching north all day, just behind the main lines, and so. That's a luxury that the Union don't have. The Union do not have any fresh troops. They get, I don't know if you want to call them reinforcements, but they get some extra troops come in. You know, they're not going to be heavily engaged, but you know, they are better than nothing, I guess. I mean, it's one regiment really, and they're mounted on horses and mules, and they just happen to be in the area.
We'll take anybody.
Those guys, that regiment's interesting too. But 7th Kentucky. But the Union, they have no one fresh really, while the Confederates have this entire brigade that hasn't even been engaged yet. So they just swap out one of the brigades with this new fresh brigade who is also pretty decently experienced, and so they renew the attack. And I mean they meet head on. I mean in this part of the fight is I think I would call it probably the sharpest part of the entire battle, where the firing is the worst, the casualties are the worst. You know, this is where one regiment, I think it's the one of the Tennessee regiments here. I mean, their overall casualties for the battle ends up being about well over 100 men, and that's the highest casualty rate of any regiment at the battle, especially Confederate regiments. You know, they get hit hard, and most of these casualties come from this particular part of the battle. So it was I think it was 2nd Tennessee, I think is who it was. It's in Hill's brigade there. But they, you know, they get hit hard. This is where they also lose, you know, Colonel Hill, who's commanding a brigade, he gets hit. He gets wounded, not severely, but they also lose a colonel. One of the Tennessee regiments gets killed here too. So it's a place where, I mean, they lose a lot of men. They lose a lot of leadership and decent, good leadership. And if there's a part in the battle where the Confederates actually get stalled, this is it. I mean, part of the line, it does stagger, and the men get to a point where they don't really want to go any further. And it takes some good leadership to get them up and moving again. And this is when Bull Nelson, he's riding up and down his line, and he's saying things like, boys, if they can't hit me, then they can't hit a bar or something like that, or they won't be able to hit you. And if it's one thing that I feel like we should learn from the Civil War is to never say they'll never hit me. It's always like famous last words. Even though Nelson doesn't get killed, but he gets shot, in the leg, groin area. It's not a really major wound, but it reminds me of John Sedgwick out east in 1864 when he says, they can't hit an elephant at this distance. And as he's saying that, a bullet goes right through his mouth and out the back of his head and kills him. It's like, nice words right there. But so Nelson says that, and then he gets hit. But there is some thought that maybe one of his own men fired that shot at him because of the way that he had been acting, previously, hitting his men, just cussing them out and everything like that. And
somebody's tired of
the abuse, and someone, I think, takes a shot at him. Not really for sure there, but that's one of the stories. So he's down and he's howling in pain. He's a loud guy too. So he's down, and eventually, the line, the Union, they don't really have much artillery left here at all. They're out of ammunition for their artillery. I think they have one gun that's able to get off a few shots, and and that's it, which isn't going to be enough. And the Confederates eventually just they crack the line, and after that, it's just full on retreat. I mean, just sprinting towards Richmond, and then through the streets, and then up to Lexington. Some guys veer off to go towards somewhere else, but most of the guys are trying to get up to Lexington. So you've got this retreat that happens. There's a little bit of fighting in the city itself, not much. There's just some shots that are traded back and forth while the Union is trying to turn this nasty, embarrassing route into just a normal retreat, an orderly retreat. But as that's happening, Colonel John Scott, we haven't talked about him in a while, but during the entire day, he's been riding towards the west of the entire battle. And he eventually, by this point, has made it to the north side of Richmond while the Union Army starts its retreat through Richmond. And so as the Confederate Army is moving in from the south, John Scott comes in from the east and the north and just gobbles up these men as they're retreating. And so I think they end up having like 4,000 prisoners. And they have so many men that, one guy goes, one Confederate officer says, I don't know, I can't put a number on it, but we've got this many acres with men in it full. So just to kind of give you an example there, a mental example there, I guess, or image. And so, they capture about 4,000 men. And,
wow.
When you think about all the men that are killed and wounded, it's several hundred. And this army of about, 6,800, it's basically destroyed. It's got some remnants that make it out. Not very many, obviously. Bull Nelson, General Manson, his horse gets shot, and his horse lands on him. He's stuck, and he gets captured. Nelson gets captured, but it's finally getting dark now, and the Confederates don't have enough men. This cavalry, John Scott's cavalry, less than 1,000 men, and they've captured 4,000 here, basically. And they don't have enough men to watch everybody, and then it gets dark, and they can't watch everybody. So Nelson's able to slip away, and Cruft is able to slip away too. So they go out into the fields and they flew the coop,
run away.
Yeah, they make it to safety. And so a lot of Union soldiers do that too. They initially surrendered, and then they see an opportunity and they just walk away.
Just walk out. Yeah.
So it's there's a lot of stories like that, but the bulk of them, they are captured, and then Kirby Smith doesn't really want to have the responsibility of feeding these men and guarding them or sending them south, which is going to take away men from his army that he already has. So he decides he's just going to parole them all. And so if you ever go through Fold 3 and you look up some of these, especially 7th Kentucky Regiment that was there, you can go through a lot of the men. You can find these parole slips, that are signed in Kirby Smith's name and say captured at Richmond August 30th, and they're paroled. So they don't go to prison camp, but they either go home until they're exchanged, or they go back to the army where they had to sit in like a parole camp or something until they are officially exchanged, and then they get to join the fight again. But so that's what he decides to do. So these men are just, some march north, some march east and west. It's just kind of, they go everywhere.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it, though. That's the end of the.
That's the end of the battle. Yeah, and then next day, cross the Kentucky River without really any resistance, and Lexington's next. They marched.
Just think if there's a force.
Yeah.
If there was a force waiting on the side of the river.
Yeah.
That would have probably prevented it.
Yeah, and good thing for the Confederates, is they destroyed that force basically before they got to the river. So that was the goal, was this Union force has foolishly moved south of the river, and if we want to get to the other side of that river, we're going to have to destroy them before we get there, and that's what they did. And so then they were able to cross the river easily and went into Lexington to great fanfare, a lot of cheer, a lot of support there. Not a lot of recruits,
and they were,
but
not as much
recruits, but a lot of people were happy to see them. So.
Well, and that's an interesting part of it, is like that, they were in Lexington for a good amount of time. I mean, you think about Frankfurt, they were only there for like a week, but an interesting fact, and I might have mentioned this before on the show, Lexington was the only city to run a horse race under a Confederate flag and a American flag.
I did not know that.
Yeah, because while they were there, horse racing kept going for sure. They ain't gonna stop horse racing, but it doesn't matter who's in charge. But but yeah, that's an interesting little fact there. And there's a book written, and I think it's Frances Peters or something. She is in Lexington during the Confederate takeover and when the Confederates leave, and she has like a diary. It's pretty interesting. I've not read all of it, but pretty good little book to check out if you're kind of get the feel of the time.
Always interesting, I think, to see from that perspective. I read so much about the soldier's perspective or the general's perspective, but getting the view from a civilian, I think, is always pretty interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, second biggest battle in Kentucky, probably for sure.
Yeah, that and Mill Springs. I mean, they're similar.
Mill Springs, pretty close. Yeah. But it's funny. I mean, we'll have to talk about Perryville too, and then compare the two, because one of them was kind of a dumb Union loss and a great Confederate victory. Yeah. And the other one's kind of the same thing, only flip the sides a little bit.
Perryville, it's such an interesting battle. It's one of these where so many weird things happen. I mean, Confederates, they tear up that Union line, or one Union corps gets tore up, and then they finally realize, there's two more that didn't even fight today. So we might have won today. If we stick around, it's not gonna stay that way. So it's such a the entire Kentucky campaign, I think, is just fascinating. And there's some good books on it, but I feel like there just needs to be a whole lot more on it.
Yeah. Well, and Richmond is so interesting because it's just one day, man. All that happens in one day. I mean, that's a lot. And I mean, you could probably definitely go into a lot more detail, but that's when
we do the tour, I cover the Confederate side, and then my friend Derrick, he covers the Union side. He's from Ohio, so naturally he's going to cover the Union side. Southern side there. So, but so we split it up that way, and we start off at this year we started off at Big Hill, and then we just moved our way north, and as went to the spots where the armies that were at the best that we could, and we talked about what happened there as best we could from the views that we could see, and we had lunch in the middle of the day, so we had our lulls in between the action, and but it was a fun time, and we spent most of the day outside, walking the field and talking Battle of Richmond. So it was
pretty cool.
A whole lot that you can go into.
Yeah, and again, before we wrap up, so you said the depot is on a lot of the spot. You can't go to it really.
Yeah.
And then there's the Richmond Cemetery. Is some of the area was there.
Yeah.
And then
and there's a lot of
Duncannon.
Yeah, Duncannon Lane is, you can see where Manson's line was, but where the heaviest fighting took place, that's been developed. But yeah, so the first phase, you've got Mount Zion Church, you've got the Armstrong House. I mean, you got Churchill's Draw, where those Confederates were unnoticingly, marching through, and then which is, I mean, just seeing that. I mean, there's a neighborhood that's right by the church there.
Yeah.
There's a golf course there. It's like a walking trail too. But from Mount Zion Church, you can get a good sense of where they were at, and kind of where the movements were at. I mean, if you just stop at Mount Zion Church, I mean, that building is just so interesting to look through.
Is there a specific part that's like the park?
Yeah, that's
like a battlefield park?
Yeah, so if you go to the first, what I call the first phase, at the Armstrong House, that's where they have the battlefield park. That's where Civil War Trust, now American Battlefield Trust, that's where they saved several acres.
Operate out of.
Yeah, and Battle of Richmond Association was huge in doing that too. If you're interested in Richmond, you really need to check them out. Donate to them. They're the ones that are doing the heavy lifting on the ground. They are the ones that are have put interpretive signs in. They're the ones that promote the reenactment. They're helping us out with the tour. We've had several of their members that were with us when we did it, and hopefully even more next year. So trying to partner with them. They have a great museum there. The Armstrong House is kind of a museum. But then there's another home there that was a wartime home that is not exactly at any of the fighting area, but the troops definitely marched through that area. But it's I think it's Madison County Visitors. I can't remember the exact name off the top of my head, but it's a museum too. It's open during the week, and they've got some great artifacts in there. And my son, he's 6, he loved going through there. So it's pretty neat. And there's I think they've got a video on Richmond in there that they play, and they got a really cool big I guess like map, but it's a topography map they've got in the middle of the room. And, you can kind of see where phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 occurred. And when you push the button, it lights up and it gives you a little thing about what happened there. So there's a lot to check out. Richmond is a hidden gem, I feel like. It's not a big national battlefield or a state battlefield park, but it's something where you've got a lot of local people that have put in a lot of work and a lot of dedication and made it really a special place, I think. And I love visiting there.
Something definitely worth checking out. Taking the tour as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
And how? So you're planning the tour for next year as well. How would you sign up for that?
So we haven't really started pushing it yet on our website. We're still trying to nail down the exact date, but we're thinking it's be a little earlier in the year, next year, earlier in the summer at least. Because we did it this year. I think very end of July. I think it was like July 30th, something like that. We did it. It was a hot day. I mean, we got lucky with weather. It was cloudy, and so that took off a little of the heat. But still, that it could have been sweltering hot. But so we're gonna do it a little bit earlier next year. So if you go to westerntheatercivilwar.com, scroll down towards events, and you'll find several of the different events that we're doing. We're doing something for Perryville next year too. We're still in the planning stages, but it's going to be pretty awesome. I think we're going to have several great tour guides there doing that. They're going to focus on their own aspect of the battle. and it's going to be pretty awesome, I think. So that's still in the planning stage. We're planning that for next fall, next year. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up. But yeah, Richmond is going to be one where I think Daryl and I have basically decided we're going to do it every year. It's going to be an annual thing because, you know, I think the more that we can do for Richmond, the more that we can get people there to visit, then, you know, that's going to be much better for them and being able to preserve more of that battlefield whenever the opportunities pop up.
Yeah, well, that sounds good, and that's we'll do as many podcast episodes as we need to on it as well. I'm gonna try to do this. Let's see how it goes. Oh, there it goes. It's working so far. We're gonna have us an outro here. So again, if you're listening to this on podcast, you can go to YouTube and watch the episode of mine and Derrick's faces and a few other pictures. So that's pretty cool. Again, you can find Derrick at on Facebook at Facebook at Kentucky Civil War. Just type in Kentucky Civil War. On Twitter as well. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at KY History Pod. Derrick, man, thanks for joining us. I guess maybe Perryville's next. We can talk about Perryville.
Yeah, anytime you talk Civil War,
Wildcat.
I can always make time to talk about Civil War. So yeah,
Wildcat Mountain.
Oh, I love talking about the Eastern Kentucky stuff too. There is so much Civil War history that I feel like gets glossed over for some of the bigger events that are just so important, but also still, you know, really interesting too.
Yeah. No, people talk about there's nothing in Eastern Kentucky much in the Civil War, but there's a bunch of little skirmishes.
Oh yeah,
and, all over.
Yeah, like I said, Wildcat Mountain. That's a big one. Middle Creek. I mean, there's future presidents down there. So you know, there's some interesting stuff going on.
With a little bit of technical difficulties there at the end with the Derrick. We just want to say thank you again, Derrick, for coming on, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Welcome to the Kentucky History Channel, where we strive to bring you all the Kentucky history content you want and you deserve. Kentucky is a part of all of us, and we plan on covering all the history we can, from Pike County to Fulton County, from Louisville to Harlan. Here on our YouTube channel, you can find many videos dedicated to different events, people, governors, and places in Kentucky. There's something for everybody. While you're here, if you like the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification button so you get notified anytime new Kentucky history is available. And if you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon page as well, or patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. You've probably heard about Daniel Boone, but what about the rest of the frontiersmen who came to Kentucky and settled? That's what we want to bring to the Kentucky History Channel. The stories of the untold, the stories of those forgotten. One thing to expect on our channel is great Kentucky content. Some stories that you've never heard of. The Night Riders, who began in western Kentucky. Bloody Monday, the riots in Louisville. The assassination of Governor Goebel, the only governor ever assassinated in the United States. Stories from all over Kentucky, stories that are unforgettable once you've heard them. You can find out who counties in Kentucky are named after and how your county got started. From beginning to end, we plan to document every county in Kentucky, all 120. Reach out to us on all of our social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and also leave a comment on one of our YouTube videos. You can also check out our podcast episodes. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. We're always seeking to find more Kentucky history so we can bring it to you. The viewers, the listeners, we want all the stories and all the events from Kentucky's great history to be told and shared everywhere.